Today, I got the Sony a7S III. I'm going to tell you the 5 things I like and the 5 things I don't like after shooting with this camera for 2 weeks. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's go. Okay, so the thing I think I like the most about the Sony a7S III is the fact that it has beautiful 4K video. This is uncropped video, there's no downsampling, there's no pixel shifting, no nothing, it's just straight 4K. A lot of that's due to its 12 megapixel sensor, but I also think that whatever they got in this camera, the guts-wise, has just made an absolute beautiful image. And I can tell you that I absolutely really enjoy the image coming out of this camera. It's been one of the joys of really working with this camera for the last 2 weeks. But to achieve it, what they did is they gave it only a 12 megapixel sensor, which for a lot of people might leave this out as a hybrid camera because at the end of the day, 12 megapixels for photos might not be enough. Definitely enough for social media and even thumbnails, but if you're gonna use this thing for photos, it's not gonna work very well if you need to crop and post. So you're gonna have to make sure you get your composition 100% right. Otherwise, you're gonna have a real big problem in post if you have to really crop in. It's gonna get real pixely and it's not gonna look great. That's my first con, is that 12 megapixel sensor. Now what I am digging about this camera is the color science. This is a little bit of an updated color science. Now I am in a very greenish area, so there might be a little bit of green tint here, which I can definitely take out in post. But I absolutely love the color science on this camera. It's got that S-Log3 with the 10-bit 422 color. This was the first camera that Sony brought out with that 10-bit color. And I think it does a phenomenal job. I mean, it is a primary video camera, so it's got to do great in all aspects, in my opinion, for the $3,500 price tag. And one of the things that was lacking from most Sony cameras was the 10-bit 422 video. And in this one, we got it. We got it in 4K, we got it in slow motion, we got it in 1080p, we got it all over the place. And the 10-bit, it makes a big difference when you're color grading. Now, one of the things that I miss from my Sony a7 IV is the fact that you can't do APS-C mode. Sometimes you need that extra little reach, so you're using a prime lens, or maybe that zoom just isn't far enough. And sometimes using that APS-C mode can save you in a pinch. It doesn't require you to carry around extra lenses. Sometimes you can just hit that APS-C mode, you're cropped in, and you're still getting great video from any Sony camera. That APS-C mode usually is pretty close to standard 4K, kind of like the image you're seeing right here. But that is one of the things that I definitely miss. It's one of the cons that I have with this camera that I really wish it could have, but I do understand being a 12 megapixel sensor, that's not possible. Now, this thing is the low light king, so it can do pretty much anything in the dark. No matter what you do, no image is gonna look amazing without any light. You can get away with just using your cell phone flashlight to light up a scene enough for this camera to see. I mean, this thing has essentially a dual gain ISO. With S-Log3, it starts at 640, but it also cleans up at 12,800, which is nice because sometimes you need a little extra ISO without having to make it all muddy. The downside is sometimes to get to that 1280, you're gonna have to slap an ND filter on, even at night, to get to that spot. Now, one of the things that I really wish Sony would do to upgrade this camera, introduce a new firmware that would offer that focus breathing that you get in the Sony a7 IV. So one of the things that drives people crazy is, see the corners as I focus in and out? It definitely does a lot of focus breathing, and I wish that you could do some sort of focus breathing compensation to ultimately make it a lot better when you're showing off products. Because to be honest with you, this thing is definitely the ultimate YouTube camera. If you're a product showcase person, that focus breathing can drive you absolutely crazy. Sorry for everybody at home. Go ahead, leave the comments down below. Go ahead, scream at me about the focus breathing. Let's go. This camera offers 4K in 24, 30, 60p, and 120. It's probably the best 4K that you're gonna see, and it's one of the few cameras that can do the 4K 120, which is unbelievable. 4K 120 does give you the ability when you're shooting video to crop in and post, which is sometimes nice because you don't have that APS-C mode. Even if you crop in, you can get down to a 1080 resolution, which is gonna still look phenomenal whenever you post this thing on social media. I do love the fact that it's got the 4K 120. It also has 1080p 240, which no other Sony camera offers. Now, one of the biggest gripes that I have about this camera is this LCD screen. I love the flip LCD screen, The downside is I don't like the resolution. It's really tough sometimes to really know if you're in focus, if you're nailing things, and it can be really tough to really gauge your exposure and everything properly because the LCD screen is not that great. Now it does have Sony's very best EVF, which is great, but I don't know about you, when I'm shooting video, normally I'm behind the camera and I'm holding it. I don't normally want it up in my eye. Sometimes I want different angles, I want different heights. And if I'm holding it in my eye, then I'm literally up and down all day long. So I really wish that they would have put one of those new LCD screens that they put in the Sony AR3A and the AR4A. That would have made this camera so much better. And I do understand that you have to cut costs somewhere in order to make this thing affordable. I'm not gonna say everybody, $3,500 is not a cheap camera. So for most people that are doing content creation, $3,500 might be the top end of what they really want to spend. So I do understand sometimes you gotta cut a little bit just to make it so everybody can afford to buy it. So again, this might be the best image that I've ever seen out of any Sony camera. I can tell you that I absolutely love this camera. So my 5th Pro, this camera is fantastic for so many things. It's a beautiful camera. Even in 2022, you're not gonna go wrong with this camera. You're gonna get great image. This is gonna be a camera that you're probably gonna be able to use for the next 3, 4, 5 years and easily into the future. Maybe until they come out with a Sony a7S4, which will probably be 4 or 5 years from now, seeing how the 2 version was out for 5 years before the 3 version. That leads me to the final con that I have about this camera. And that is, I want to thank Sony for sending this out to me to let me test it for you today, because today's the last day I have it. So I have to return it. So that's my con, is I have to return it. So who knows? Maybe it'll show up in my arsenal once again. Sony, thank you so much for sending this out to me. If you like this video, I'm sure you're gonna like the video on the screen now. It's about another Sony camera. Before you leave, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Thanks for watching.